My sister asked me to illegally pretend to be her at a fertility clinic to get pregnant with her baby. When I refused, her controlling husband stalked me, destroyed my property, and even broke into my home while his mother encouraged everything until police finally intervened. Hi Reddit, I, 28F, need to get this off my chest because I don't know what to do anymore. My older sister Giselle, 32F, has been married to her husband Dean for 6 years now. I've been with my boyfriend Nash for about 2 years. Giselle and I have always been close growing up. Our mom left when I was 5 and Giselle was 9. Dad raised us by himself while working 2 jobs. Giselle basically helped raise me in a lot of ways. She'd make sure I did my homework, pack my lunches, braid my hair before school. We shared a room until I was in high school. She was more than just a sister to me. We took different paths though. Giselle met Dean in college and they got married right after graduation. She never finished her degree. She worked as a receptionist for maybe 6 months before Dean convinced her to quit. He makes good money as an engineer and she's been home ever since. They bought a house in the suburbs. She spends her time decorating it, going to yoga classes, meeting friends for lunch. That kind of life. I went a different direction. I finished college and got a job in marketing. I rent an apartment in the city with a roommate. I travel when I can. I like my independence. Nash and I have talked about moving in together, but we're taking it slow. The thing about Giselle is she's always wanted kids. When we were little she had this whole plan mapped out. She'd show me notebooks where she'd written baby names. She had magazine cutouts of nursery designs taped to her wall. She talked about having at least 3 kids. Maybe 4. It was always her dream. I never felt that way. Kids just never appealed to me. I like my nephew from my cousin, but I'm happy to give him back at the end of the day. The idea of being pregnant, giving birth, raising a child just doesn't interest me. I've known this about myself for a long time. Giselle and Dean started trying for a baby about 4 years ago. I knew it wasn't happening easily because Giselle would make comments here and there. She'd see a pregnant woman and get quiet. She stopped going to baby showers. I didn't push her to talk about it. Last year she finally told me they'd been doing treatments. They'd tried IVF twice. Both times failed. They'd spent over $50,000. Insurance didn't cover most of it. Dean's parents helped with some of the cost. The whole thing was taking a toll on them. About 6 weeks ago Giselle came over to my apartment on a Tuesday evening. Nash was working late. We ordered Chinese food and were watching some cooking show. She seemed nervous the whole time. She kept picking at her noodles. Finally she turned down the TV volume and said she needed to ask me something important. She asked if I would consider being their surrogate. I didn't say anything at first. I just stared at her. She kept talking, explaining that the doctors said her uterus had some issue. Scarring or something. She could produce eggs but couldn't carry a pregnancy. They'd already looked into surrogacy agencies but the cost was astronomical. Over $100,000. They'd already spent so much on IVF that they couldn't afford it. Then she said since we're sisters it would be perfect. The baby would still be biologically hers and Dean's. They'd just need me to carry it. 9 months. That's all. I told her no. I tried to be gentle about it. I explained that I've never wanted to be pregnant. That pregnancy itself scares me. That 9-month is not just 9 months. It's gaining weight, dealing with morning sickness, not being able to work properly, then labor and delivery. I told her I loved her but I couldn't do this. She asked why not. I reminded her that I'd been clear my whole life about not wanting kids or pregnancy. She said this was different. I wouldn't be keeping the baby. I'd just be helping her. I suggested they save up for a professional surrogate or look into adoption. She got upset at that. She said she didn't want to adopt. She wanted to experience having a baby that was biologically theirs. She wanted Dean to see his child, not raise someone else's kid. Then she started crying. She said after everything she'd been through, all the shots and procedures and disappointments, she thought I of all people would understand. She said family helps family. She reminded me of all the times she'd helped me. When I needed money for college textbooks. When I had my appendix out and she stayed at the hospital. When my car broke down and she drove an hour to pick me up. She said I was being selfish. That 9 months of my life was nothing compared to her entire dream of being a mother. That I could easily take some time off work. That Nash would understand. That it was just carrying a baby, not even raising it. I held firm and said no again. She left without finishing her food. She didn't speak to me for 2 weeks after that. No texts, no calls, nothing. Finally she sent me a text saying she was disappointed in me but she loved me. I texted back that I loved her too. Then 3 weeks after that conversation, she started sending me things. Pictures from when we were kids. Screenshots of text conversations where I told her I loved her. Photos of us at family events. Each one came with a message asking me to reconsider. Asking how I could abandon her when she needed me most. Nash told me to block her but I couldn't do that. She's my sister. I called Dad to see if he knew what was going on. He sighed and said Giselle had called him crying about it. He said he stayed out of it because it wasn't his place to tell me what to do with my body. But I could tell he thought I should help her. The messages kept coming. Giselle sent me photos of negative pregnancy tests. She sent me screenshots of her conversations with Dean where he was talking about giving up on having kids. She sent me a video of herself crying saying she didn't know why I hated her so much. I don't hate her. I just can't do what she's asking. Last week she showed up at my apartment again. Nash answered the door. She pushed past him and found me in the bedroom. She had this wild look in her eyes. She asked if I'd thought about it more. I said my answer was still no. That's when she really lost it. She started yelling that I was ruining her marriage. That Dean was pulling away from her because of the baby situation. That his family kept making comments about her being broken. That this was all my fault because I could fix it but I was choosing not to. She grabbed a framed photo of us from my dresser and threw it against the wall. The glass shattered. Nash came running in and told her she needed to leave. She turned on him and said he had no right to keep us apart. That this was between sisters. Nash physically stood between us and told her to get out. She finally left but not before saying she'd never forgive me for this. That was 5 days ago. Since then I've gotten maybe 40 text messages from her. Dad called and said Giselle told him I'd attacked her at my apartment. That Nash had threatened her. None of that is true but now Dad is upset with me for apparently causing drama. Dean sent me an email yesterday. It was long. He explained how hard this has been on Giselle. How she cries every night. How she's on medication for depression now. How their marriage is falling apart. He said I'm the only one who can save their family. He said if I truly loved my sister I'd do this one thing for her. I showed Nash the email. He said Dean was manipulating me. That this whole thing is crazy. That no one can force me to be pregnant. But I keep thinking about Giselle. About how she raised me when Mom left. About how she's always been there. About how this is literally her only dream in life and I could make it happen. Nash says if I even consider it he doesn't know if he can stay with me. He says watching them pressure me like this is making him sick. He says it's my choice but he can't support me putting myself through something I don't want just because they're guilting me into it. I haven't slept properly in days. My phone won't stop buzzing. Giselle sent me a photo this morning of her childhood diary where she'd drawn pictures of her future babies. I don't know what to do. Part of me wants to just agree to make this all stop. But another part of me knows that's wrong. That I shouldn't have to sacrifice my body and 9 months of my life just to fix someone else's problems. Am I really being selfish here? Should I just do this for her? Update 1. It's been 3 weeks since my original post. I need to update you all because things have gotten much worse. First, thank you to everyone who commented. Most of you told me I was right to refuse and that I was being manipulated. A few of you shared your own surrogacy stories and explained how difficult it actually is. One person pointed out that I couldn't even be a surrogate legally because I've never had a child before. I looked this up and you were right. In my state, surrogates need to have successfully carried at least one pregnancy to term. Giselle would have known this if she'd actually researched it properly. That made me suspicious. So I called Giselle to ask her directly if she knew about this requirement. She didn't answer. But Dean called me back an hour later. He asked why I was asking about legal requirements. I told him what I'd learned. There was a long pause. Then he said they'd already figured out a workaround. A workaround. I asked what that meant. He explained they'd found a fertility clinic 3 hours away that works with what he called non-traditional surrogacy arrangements. He said we wouldn't go through the normal channels. Instead, Giselle and I would go together for the first appointment. I'd pretend to be Giselle. Once I was pregnant, I'd switch to my own OB/GYN and we'd explain it was a surrogacy arrangement after the fact. I asked if that was legal. He said it was a gray area but people do it all the time. He made it sound casual. Like it was no big deal to commit fraud and lie to medical professionals. I told him absolutely not. That I wasn't going to break the law. That I'd already said no anyway and this conversation was over. He got quiet. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. He said Giselle had already told his family that I'd agreed to be their surrogate. That his parents were planning a celebration dinner. That they'd already started telling friends they were going to be grandparents soon. I hung up on him. I immediately called Giselle. She answered this time. I asked her why she'd told people I was going to be their surrogate when I'd never agreed. She started crying. She said she'd been so sure I'd come around that she just told them in advance. She said she couldn't take it back now. She begged me to just go along with it. I told her no. I said I was done with this whole situation. That she needed to tell everyone the truth. She kept crying and said she couldn't. That Dean's family would be so disappointed. That his mother had already been cruel to her about the infertility issues and this would make it worse. I asked what she meant by cruel. That's when she finally told me the truth about Dean's family. Last Christmas, they'd gone to Dean's parents' house for dinner. His mother had made some comment about how Giselle was wasting Dean's prime years. His sister had laughed and said maybe Dean should have married someone who actually worked. Then Dean's father said something about how in their day, a woman's job was to give her husband children and if she couldn't do that, what was she good for? Giselle said she'd looked at Dean, waiting for him to defend her. He'd just sat there eating his food. Later that night in the car, she'd asked why he didn't say anything. He told her his father had a point. That he'd married her expecting kids and she'd failed to deliver. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I asked why she was still with him. She said she loved him. That he was just frustrated. That if she could give him a baby, everything would go back to normal. I told her that wasn't how healthy relationships work. She hung up on me. The next day, Dean showed up at my office. Security called me down because someone was asking for me in the lobby. When I got there, he was holding flowers. He apologized for his family. He said they didn't mean it. He asked if we could get coffee and talk. I agreed because we were in public and I thought it would be safe. We went to the coffee shop across the street. He bought me a latte. He seemed calm at first. He apologized again for the pressure. He said he understood my concerns. Then he started talking about how he and Giselle had been having problems. How the infertility had driven a wedge between them. How he didn't know if their marriage would survive without a baby. He said if I loved my sister, I'd help save her marriage. I told him their marriage problems weren't my responsibility. That they needed counseling, not a baby. His whole demeanor changed. He leaned forward and said I didn't understand what I was doing to Giselle. That she'd become obsessed. That she couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. That she'd started driving past playgrounds and crying. That she'd had to quit her yoga class because another woman there was pregnant. Then he said the worst part. He said Giselle had told him she didn't want to live anymore if she couldn't be a mother. I asked if she'd said that directly. He nodded. He showed me texts from her where she'd written things about how life wasn't worth living. About how she'd failed at the one thing she was supposed to do. I felt sick. I asked if she was getting help. He said she refused to see anyone. She just kept saying that if I would help them, everything would be fine. I left the coffee shop. I called Dad immediately. I told him what Dean had shown me. Dad went quiet. Then he said Giselle had mentioned feeling low but he didn't realize it was that serious. He said he'd talked to her. That night, Giselle called me screaming. She said I'd betrayed her by telling Dad. That I'd made things worse. That Dad had come over and had a long talk with her and Dean, and now Dean was angry at her. I asked what Dad had said. She said he'd told Dean that pressuring me was wrong. That their marriage problems existed before the baby issue and a baby wouldn't fix them. That Dean needed to get Giselle proper help instead of putting everything on me. Then she said Dad had asked Dean to leave for a bit so he could talk to Giselle alone. Giselle wouldn't tell me what they discussed but she said Dad had disappointed her. That he was supposed to be on her side. The call ended with her saying she needed time away from all of us. That was 2 weeks ago. Since then, Giselle moved out of her house. She's staying with Dean's parents now, which I think is the worst possible place for her. Dean has been texting me every few days with updates. He says she barely eats. She doesn't leave the guest room. His mother apparently keeps telling her that if she can't give them grandchildren, maybe Dean should find someone who can. Yesterday, Dean sent me another message. He said his mother had suggested I should donate eggs at least, even if I won't carry the baby. They could hire a surrogate and use my eggs so the baby would still have Giselle's DNA through me, since we're sisters. He said it was a compromise. I looked up egg donation. It's not simple. It requires hormone injections for weeks. There are risks. It's invasive. And I don't want my genetic material used to create a child I have no intention of parenting or being connected to. I said no again. This morning I got a call from Giselle's number. But it was Dean's mother. She said she had Giselle's phone because Giselle had been too distraught to talk to anyone. She said I was destroying my sister. That I was selfish and cruel. That God gives some women the ability to create life and if I had it and Giselle didn't, I had a responsibility to share it with her. I hung up. Nash has been incredible through all this. He's told me multiple times that I don't owe anyone my body. That this is insane. But he's also worried. He thinks Dean is unstable. He thinks the way they're all ganging up on me isn't normal. Dad called tonight. He said he's worried about Giselle but he's also worried about me. He said he never should have stayed neutral. That he should have shut this down from the start. He told me he's proud of me for standing firm. That actually made me cry. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear that from him. But Giselle is still at Dean's parents' house. Dean is still sending me messages. And I keep thinking about those texts Giselle sent him about not wanting to live. I don't know how this ends. I just know I can't give in. But the guilt is crushing me. Update 2. It's been a month since my last update. I need to tell you what happened because it's somehow gotten even worse than before. 2 weeks ago, Dean showed up at my apartment at midnight. Nash and I were already asleep. The buzzer kept ringing. Nash checked the camera and saw it was Dean. We didn't let him up. He stood outside for an hour pressing the buzzer over and over. Finally our building manager came out and threatened to call the police. Dean left. The next morning, I found my car had 2 slashed tires. There was no note but the building cameras showed Dean's car in the parking lot around the time it must have happened. Nash wanted me to file a police report. I didn't. I was still holding out hope this could be resolved without involving law enforcement. I called Giselle instead. She answered but she sounded different. Flat. Emotionless. I told her what Dean had done. She said I must be mistaken. That Dean wouldn't do that. I said the camera showed his car. She hung up. I paid to fix my tires. I thought maybe that was the end of it. It wasn't. A few days later, my boss called me into her office. She said someone had sent an email to the company's general inbox claiming I was harassing them. The email said I'd been stalking them, sending threatening messages, showing up at their house uninvited. It included screenshots of texts that looked like they were from my number but I'd never sent them. The screenshots were faked. Badly faked. My boss could tell. But she had to document it anyway. She asked if I knew who would do this. I told her about the situation with Giselle and Dean. My boss suggested I get a restraining order. I said I'd think about it. That night, someone threw a brick through my living room window. Nash was at work. I was home alone. The brick had a piece of paper wrapped around it with a rubber band. The paper said, "Just say yes and this all stops." I called the police. They came and took a report. They said without proof of who did it, there wasn't much they could do. They suggested I install security cameras. Nash and I went to the hardware store the next day and bought 2 cameras. We installed them ourselves. I finally called Dad and told him everything. He was furious. He said he was going to talk to Dean and end this once and for all. I asked him not to. I was afraid it would make things worse. But Dad didn't listen. He drove to Giselle and Dean's house the next day. Giselle wasn't there. She was still staying at Dean's parents' place. But Dean was home. Dad told me later what happened. He said he'd knocked on the door and Dean answered. Dad told him the harassment needed to stop immediately. That he'd gone too far. That he was going to destroy his marriage and his life if he kept this up. Dean apparently laughed. He said Dad didn't understand the pressure he was under. That his family had expectations. That Giselle was falling apart and it was my fault for refusing to help. He said I had something Giselle needed and I was withholding it out of spite. Dad said he'd told Dean that I didn't owe anyone access to my body. That the request itself was unreasonable. That Dean needed to get Giselle professional help instead of blaming me. Dean's response was to slam the door in Dad's face. The next day, Giselle called me for the first time in weeks. She asked if I knew what Dad had done. I said yes. She said I'd ruined everything. That Dean was angrier than ever now. That his parents were pressuring him to leave her because she couldn't even get her own sister to help them. I asked her why she was still defending him. Why she was staying with people who treated her terribly. She said I wouldn't understand because I'd never wanted the things she wanted. Then she said something that still haunts me. She said, "You took Mom from me when you were born. The least you could do is help me become one." I didn't know what to say. Our mom left when I was 5. Giselle was 9. I didn't make Mom leave. But Giselle apparently had been carrying this resentment for years. She blamed me for Mom abandoning us. I asked her if she'd really felt that way all this time. She started crying and said she didn't know. That everything was confused. That she just wanted a baby and couldn't understand why that was so hard. I suggested she talk to someone. A professional. She said she didn't need to talk to anyone. She needed me to stop being selfish. We haven't spoken since that call. That was 2 weeks ago. But the harassment didn't stop. My work email got flooded with spam. Someone signed me up for hundreds of mailing lists. My social media accounts were reported multiple times until they got suspended. Someone created fake dating profiles using my photos. Nash insisted I file a police report about all of it. I did. They said they'd investigate, but these things are hard to trace. They asked if I had any proof Dean was behind it. I didn't have concrete proof. Just strong suspicion. 3 days ago, I came home from work to find someone had been in my apartment. Nothing was stolen. But things were moved. My laptop was open on a page I hadn't left it on. My dresser drawers weren't fully closed. A coffee mug was sitting on the counter that had been in the cabinet when I left. I called Nash in a panic. He came home immediately. We checked the security footage from the cameras we'd installed. They only covered the front door and window. We hadn't put one inside yet. The footage showed no one entering or leaving. Nash said maybe I was being paranoid. That maybe I'd forgotten how I'd left things. But I know someone was in there. I could feel it. We changed the locks that day. I couldn't sleep in the apartment anymore. We packed bags and went to a hotel. Yesterday, Dad called. He said Giselle had come to see him. She'd left Dean's parents' house and was staying with Dad now. She'd told him that Dean had become controlling. That he'd been monitoring her phone. That he'd told her she couldn't talk to me or Dad without his permission. That his parents had been telling her she was worthless. Dad said Giselle had asked him what she should do. He'd told her to file for divorce. She'd said she didn't know if she could. That she still loved Dean. That she believed if they could just have a baby, he'd go back to being the man she married. Dad said he'd told her there was no baby coming. That Dean needed to accept that. That their marriage needed to end before something really bad happened. Giselle apparently cried for hours. Dad said she finally fell asleep on his couch. She's still there now. I asked Dad if he thought Dean was the one who'd been harassing me. Dad said yes. That Dean had become obsessed. That he'd built up this idea that I was the only thing standing between him and the life he wanted. This morning I got a text from an unknown number. It said, you can't hide forever. We both know how this ends. Just agree and everyone can move on. I showed it to Nash. He said we're not going back to the apartment. That we need to stay somewhere Dean can't find us. We're at his brother's house now, 2 towns over. I don't know what Dean is going to do next. I don't know if Giselle will finally leave him. I don't know how long I have to live like this. All I know is I can't give in. Even though I'm exhausted. Even though I'm scared. I just want my life back. Update 3. It's been 6 weeks since my last update. This is probably my final post about this situation because it's mostly resolved now, though not in any way I could have predicted. I'll start with what happened 3 weeks ago. Giselle was still staying with Dad. Dean had been calling her constantly but she wasn't answering. Dad had convinced her to at least talk to a lawyer about separation. She'd made an appointment. The night before her appointment, Dean showed up at Dad's house. It was around 11 at night. He pounded on the door until Dad opened it. Dad told me Dean looked terrible. He hadn't shaved in weeks. His clothes were wrinkled. He smelled like he hadn't showered. Dean demanded to see Giselle. Dad said no. Dean tried to push past him. Dad blocked the doorway. Giselle came to see what was happening. She stood behind Dad. Dean started yelling at her. He said she'd betrayed him by leaving. That she'd promised to build a life with him and she was giving up. That if she'd just convinced me to help them, none of this would have happened. That his parents were right about her being useless. Giselle just stood there. She didn't say anything. Dean kept going. He said I'd poisoned her mind against him. That I was jealous because she'd found someone to love her and I was alone. I wasn't alone. I had Nash. But Dean wasn't making sense anymore. Dad told Dean to leave. Dean refused. He said he wasn't leaving without Giselle. Dad called the police. Dean finally left before they arrived. But he sat in his car outside the house. Dad and Giselle watched from the window. Dean stayed there all night. His car was still there in the morning. Giselle went to her lawyer appointment anyway. Dad drove her. Dean followed them the whole way. He waited in the parking lot while she met with the lawyer. When they came out, Dean got out of his car and approached them. He begged Giselle to come home. She said no. He asked if she'd really throw away 6 years of marriage. She said he'd already destroyed their marriage himself. Dean grabbed her arm. Dad stepped between them. Dean let go but he started yelling about how I'd ruined his life. How Giselle was all he had and I was taking her away from him. How he'd never forgive me for this. Dad got Giselle in the car. They drove to the police station and filed for a restraining order. It was granted temporarily. Dean wasn't supposed to come within 500 feet of Giselle or Dad's house. That same week, Nash and I filed for one too. Ours was also granted. Dean violated Giselle's restraining order 3 times in the first week. The first time, he left flowers on Dad's porch with a note apologizing. The second time, he showed up at Giselle's yoga studio and waited outside until her class ended. The third time, he followed her grocery shopping. Each time, Giselle called the police. Each time, they documented it. After the third violation, Dean was arrested. He spent 2 nights in jail before his parents bailed him out. While Dean was in jail, Giselle stayed at Dad's house and started going through her things from the house she'd shared with Dean. She found his laptop. She told me later she probably shouldn't have looked through it but she did. What she found was worse than any of us imagined. Dean had been documenting everything. He had spreadsheets tracking my schedule. He'd noted when I left for work, when I came home, where I went on weekends. He had screenshots of all my social media posts. He'd created fake accounts to follow me online. He'd been planning this harassment campaign for months. But the worst part was what else Giselle found. Emails between Dean and his mother. His mother had been encouraging all of it. She'd told him that I needed to be convinced by any means necessary. She'd suggested the slash tires. She'd helped him create the fake screenshots that were sent to my work. His mother had also been communicating with surrogacy agencies. She'd found one in another country with fewer regulations. She'd been planning to take Giselle there and have the procedure done whether Giselle fully understood what was happening or not. The emails made it clear Dean's mother intended to take control of the entire situation. Giselle brought all of this to the police. They opened a more serious investigation. Dean was charged with stalking and harassment. His mother was brought in for questioning but ultimately not charged with anything. She claimed she was just trying to help her son. Dean took a plea deal. He's on probation for 2 years. He has to stay away from me, Giselle, Dad, and Nash. He's not allowed to contact any of us directly or indirectly. He has to go to court-mandated anger management. Giselle filed for divorce. Their prenup made it straightforward since they had no kids and she'd never worked during the marriage. She got a settlement that will support her for a while. She moved into her own apartment last month. She's not staying with Dad anymore. She's taking online classes to finish her degree. She says she wants to be a teacher. Giselle and I still haven't really repaired our relationship. We text occasionally. Short messages. She'll ask how I'm doing. I'll ask the same. But we haven't seen each other in person since before all this started. There's too much between us now. She did apologize once over text. She said she'd gotten lost in wanting a baby so badly that she'd stopped seeing clearly. That Dean had taken advantage of that and manipulated her. That she understood now why I said no. That she was sorry for everything. I texted back that I accepted her apology but needed time. Nash and I moved to a different apartment. We didn't renew the lease on my old place. Too many bad memories there. The new place feels safer. We got a security system installed before we even moved our furniture in. Dad checks in on both of us regularly. He visits Giselle once a week. He has dinner with Nash and me every other week. He's trying to keep some kind of family connection alive. I appreciate that about him. I still have moments where I'm looking over my shoulder. Where I check and recheck that doors are locked. Where I jump at unexpected sounds. Nash says that's normal after what happened. He's been patient with me. Giselle told me last week that she'd started talking to someone at her school about the possibility of fostering kids eventually. Not adopting. Just fostering. She said she'd realized she wanted to help children who needed her, not create a perfect biological family. She said maybe this was what she was supposed to do all along. I hope that's true. I hope she finds whatever it is she's looking for. But I don't know if we'll ever be as close as we were before. Too much happened. Too much was said. Dean still lives in their old house. Giselle heard through mutual friends that he's dating someone new already. Someone younger. She wondered if he'd do the same thing to this new woman eventually. I said probably. The restraining orders expire in 18 months. I don't know what happens after that. I hope Dean has moved on by then. That he's found whatever help he needs. But I'm prepared for the possibility that he hasn't. For now, things are quiet. My life is my own again. I go to work. I come home to Nash. We're talking about getting a dog. Normal things. Giselle is building her own life. One that doesn't revolve around Dean or babies or what she thought she was supposed to want. And I'm okay with the fact that we might never be as close as we once were. Some things break and don't get fixed. Some relationships don't survive the weight of what gets put on them. That's just how it is sometimes. Now let's move to the next story. Story 2. My best friend's secret videos were shared online by her BF and she took her life. I found her and got banned from the funeral while he comforted her parents. I, 22F, need some advice on a really horrible situation. I'm currently sitting in my car outside my apartment because I can't bring myself to go inside after what happened yesterday. Maya, 22F, and I grew up together in a small religious town since elementary school. We were complete opposites. I was always outgoing and adventurous while Maya was quiet and reserved. Despite our differences, we clicked from day one. Her family was super religious, much more than mine. I remember being 7 years old and getting lectured by Maya's mom about my inappropriate Halloween costume. I was a witch. Maya's parents never said it to my face, but I knew they thought I was a bad influence on her. We stuck together through elementary and middle school. I was the one who got Maya to speak up in class, and she was the one who kept me from getting detention every other day. When we were 14, my family moved to another city for my dad's job. We tried to stay in touch through email since neither of us had smartphones yet, but Maya had very limited computer time. Her parents monitored everything. By some miracle, we both got into the same college 3 years ago. We reconnected immediately, though our friendship wasn't quite the same as before. Our majors were completely different. I'm studying journalism and she was pre-law. We were both swamped with coursework, so we only managed to meet up maybe once or twice a month. But I still considered her one of my closest friends. About a year and a half ago, Maya started dating Samuel, 23M. It was her first serious relationship. I'd never seen her so happy before. She literally glowed whenever she talked about him. I only met Samuel a handful of times, but he seemed nice enough, polite, attentive, the kind of guy who holds doors open and pulls out chairs. Maya's parents approved of him because he attended their church whenever he visited her hometown and claimed to share their values. They believed Maya and Samuel were saving themselves for marriage, which Maya let them believe because it was easier than facing their disappointment. 2 months ago, Maya called me at 2 a.m. sobbing. She could barely get the words out. When she finally calmed down, she told me she'd discovered Samuel had been secretly recording their intimate moments on his phone. Not just one video, dozens. And he'd been sharing them in private online groups. He hadn't censored her face. Some of these videos had hundreds of views. Maya was absolutely devastated. She broke up with him immediately, but she was terrified of anyone finding out. Most of her friends at college were also Samuel's friends. They all ran in the same circles, took the same classes, attended the same events. She was horrified at the thought of these people potentially seeing those videos. And her parents. If they found out, they might cut her off financially. She was depending on them to help pay for law school. She made me promise not to tell anyone. She said she needed to handle it herself. I reluctantly agreed, but I started checking in on her daily. I recognized the signs of severe depression. I've dealt with it myself. She stopped going to classes, barely ate, and would stare at her phone constantly, probably searching for more videos. Her other friends noticed something was wrong, but she told them she was just stressed about upcoming exams. Meanwhile, Samuel was telling everyone they were on a break and working things out. Yesterday, I went to Maya's apartment for our planned dinner. She wasn't answering texts or calls, which wasn't like her. I knocked on her door for nearly 10 minutes with no response. I had a bad feeling, so I called the building manager to let me in. I found Maya in her bathroom. She had taken a bottle of sleeping pills. There was no note, nothing. I called 911, but it was too late. I had to call her parents and tell them what happened. When they arrived at the hospital, her mother completely lost it. She started screaming that I corrupted Maya, that I gave her depression, that I drove her to kill herself. Campus security had to escort me out. Today I found out through mutual friends that Samuel is helping organize Maya's memorial service. He's playing the role of the devastated boyfriend who was just about to work things out with her. He's been comforting her parents. It makes me physically sick. I want to tell her parents the truth about why Maya was so depressed. I want to expose Samuel for what he did. But I'm worried about tarnishing Maya's memory. Her parents idolized her. Learning that she was sexually active and that those moments were recorded and shared might destroy them even more. Plus, I don't know if they'd even believe me over Samuel, who they've accepted as practically part of the family. I wasn't invited to Maya's funeral, which is happening this weekend. I'm considering going anyway. I need to say goodbye to my best friend. But I'm afraid I'll cause a scene if I see Samuel there acting like a grieving boyfriend. The strangest part of all this is that I haven't cried once since finding Maya. I feel completely numb. I keep waiting for the grief to hit me, for the trauma to sink in, but all I feel is this emptiness. I was the one who found her body. Shouldn't I be falling apart right now? Instead, I'm sitting in my car typing this out on my phone because I can't face going back to my apartment alone. I need advice on whether I should go to the funeral even though I wasn't invited, tell Maya's parents the truth about Samuel, confront Samuel directly, how to deal with this emotionally when all I feel is numbness. I know Reddit always suggests therapy. I'm already on the waitlist for my university's mental health services, but there's a long line and I have no idea when I'll actually get seen. I can't afford private therapy right now. Edit, I'm overwhelmed by all the responses. Thank you all for the advice and support. I want to clarify a few things. Maya deleted all the videos she could find, but there's no way to know if she got them all. I have text messages from her describing what happened and how betrayed she felt. I've decided not to go to the funeral. As much as I want to say goodbye, I need to respect her parents' wishes, and it would probably just make things worse. I'm trying to find out who else Maya might have told about this. She mentioned 2 friends from high school knew. I've reached out to one, Layla, but haven't heard back yet. After the funeral, I plan to tell Maya's parents at least part of the truth. They deserve to know what kind of person Samuel really is. I'm thinking of telling them he filmed her in the shower without consent. It's mostly true and doesn't reveal that they were sexually active. I appreciate all the support and hugs. This has been the worst experience of my life, and talking about it is exhausting, but it helps to know I'm not alone. Update 1: It's been 3 weeks since Maya's funeral, and I wanted to update everyone who offered advice and support. First, some background that's relevant. Maya and I both grew up in religious families, but we both stopped believing around high school. Maya wasn't religious during her relationship with Samuel, but her parents thought she was still devout. I know firsthand how damaging purity culture can be, which is why Maya was so afraid of her parents finding out about her having sex with Samuel. Also, I mentioned in my original post that I was outgoing and adventurous as a kid. That changed in high school when I was diagnosed with anxiety and depression. I became much more introverted and now have a small circle of friends. After posting here, I reached out to Layla, 22F, one of Maya's high school friends who I thought might know about the Samuel situation. She confirmed Maya had told her everything. Maya had also confided in another high school friend, Jade, 22F. The 3 of us compared notes and then contacted Nina, 22F, who was Maya's closest friend at college. Nina was doing a semester abroad and had no idea what had happened. Maya had been telling her everything was fine and that she and Samuel had broken up but didn't want to talk about it. After discussing it, we decided to tell Maya's parents a modified version of the truth. We told them Samuel had filmed Maya in the shower without her consent and shared the videos online. We felt this preserved Maya's dignity while still exposing Samuel's horrible actions. We decided that Maya's parents should ultimately decide how to handle the situation, and we shouldn't make that choice for them. Nina has always had a good relationship with Maya's parents, so she met with them in person to tell them what happened. Thankfully, they believed her immediately. They were devastated but grateful to finally understand what had driven Maya to such despair. With Maya's parents' blessing, Nina exposed Samuel in all their group chats, telling everyone what he had done to Maya. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, another woman named Vicky, 21F, contacted Nina. Vicky had dated Samuel 3 years ago, and he had also filmed her without consent. She had been too afraid to come forward alone. Vicky made an official complaint to the university administration. She and Maya's parents also went to the police. Vicky had more concrete evidence against Samuel, which will hopefully lead to his conviction. Unfortunately, this meant we had to tell Maya's parents the complete truth about what Samuel had actually recorded. They were hurt but understood why we had modified the story initially. They didn't blame us for trying to protect Maya's memory. The legal process is moving incredibly slowly. I suspect Samuel might get minimal punishment since his family is wealthy and well-connected. However, his social reputation is completely destroyed. Most people trusted Nina and Vicky's accounts and have ostracized him completely. He's taken a leave of absence from the university. Some alumni in their field heard about the situation and got involved, so his professional future is looking bleak as well. I've asked Nina to keep me minimally involved in the ongoing situation. I provided what evidence I had to the police, but my mental health has taken a serious hit from everything that's happened. I just don't have the energy to keep up with all the details. Nina promised to update me on any significant developments. As for me personally, I'm doing as well as can be expected. I'm struggling but hanging in there. I'm depressed but not suicidal. The support I received from my original post meant a lot to me. A few personal updates. Maya's parents reached out after Nina told them the truth. They asked to meet in person to apologize, but I wasn't ready for that, so we had a phone call instead. They apologized profusely for blaming me for Maya's death. I forgave them. They had just lost their daughter and were understandably emotional. I probably won't have much contact with them going forward, but I'm glad we resolved the misunderstanding. Regarding the funeral, Nina wasn't able to talk to Maya's parents until after the funeral, and she was still overseas at the time. I ended up missing it, which I regret, but Maya was cremated. Her parents gave Nina some of the ashes, and Nina organized a small memorial for us on campus. Layla, Jade, Nina and I had a picnic at Maya's favorite spot on campus. We spread some ashes there, had a moment of silence, and shared our favorite memories of Maya. I finally broke down and cried that day, nearly 3 weeks after her death. It was painful but cathartic. Therapy. I told my parents everything, and they helped me find a therapist with a shorter wait list than the university services. I had my intake session and should be seeing someone who specializes in grief counseling within 2 weeks. In the meantime, I've been attending support groups with Layla, Jade, and Nina. The groups don't really help me because talking about it makes me relive the experience, but the individual therapy should be better. School. My semester is almost over, and I'm trying to push through. I told my professors what happened, and they've been understanding. I've received extensions on the work I missed. I'm not sure if I'll return next semester or take some time off to recover mentally. Through this horrible experience, I've formed bonds with Layla, Jade, and Nina. We're all processing this trauma together and helping each other through it. Maya had good taste in friends. Thank you all for reading. Writing this out has been helpful for me. Update 2. It's been 3 months since Maya's death, and I wanted to provide another update for those who have been following this situation. The university investigation into Samuel's actions has concluded. He's been expelled from the school, and his academic record shows that he was removed for violation of the student code of conduct. The criminal case is still ongoing, but it's progressing better than I expected. After Vicky came forward, 3 more women contacted the police with similar stories about Samuel. There seems to be a pattern of him targeting quiet, reserved women with religious backgrounds, exactly like Maya. Maya's parents have channeled their grief into advocacy. They've established a small foundation in Maya's name focused on educating students about digital consent and privacy. They're also providing support for victims of image-based abuse. They've asked me to be involved several times, but I've mostly declined due to my mental health. However, we have met for coffee a few times, and we've developed a respectful relationship. We'll never be close, but we share a love for Maya that connects us. Samuel's family has tried using their connections and money to minimize the scandal. They offered financial settlements to Maya's parents and Vicky to drop the charges, but both refused. Samuel has transferred to a university in another state, but students there quickly learned about his history through social media. His reputation follows him wherever he goes. As for me, I started therapy 2 months ago and was diagnosed with PTSD from finding Maya. My therapist says this explains the numbness I felt initially. It was shock and dissociation. I'm taking a reduced course load this semester and considering changing my major. I'm now interested in victim advocacy or psychology, though my therapist warned me against making major life decisions while still processing trauma. Layla, Jade, Nina and I still meet regularly. We've created a memorial bench in Maya's favorite campus spot with a small plaque bearing her name and favorite quote. It's become a place where I go to talk to her when I'm having a hard day. I still struggle with guilt. I wonder if I could have done more to help Maya, if I should have told someone what was happening despite her asking me not to. My therapist is helping me work through these feelings. The rational part of me knows I did what I thought was best with the information I had at the time, but the emotional part still blames myself sometimes. One positive development is that the university has revised its policies on image-based abuse and now includes specific training on digital consent during freshman orientation. They're using Maya's story, anonymized, as a case study. At least some good might come from this tragedy. I'm learning to forgive myself while honoring Maya's memory by speaking up when I encounter similar situations. Last month, I overheard some guys in my journalism class joking about sharing intimate photos of girls they dated. I reported them to the department head. A year ago, I might have stayed silent to avoid conflict. Thank you all for your support throughout this journey. It means more than you know. Final update: it's been a year since Maya's death, and I wanted to share what I hope will be my final update on this situation. The criminal case against Samuel concluded 3 months ago with a guilty verdict. His sentence was lighter than we hoped, 18 months with possibility of parole after 8 months. His family's connections and his lack of prior record worked in his favor. However, he is required to register as a sex offender, which will follow him for life. Our university has completely transformed its approach to image-based abuse. New policies have been implemented, and Maya's story, with permission from her parents, is now shared during freshman orientation discussions about consent and digital privacy. Her legacy lives on in these changes that will hopefully protect other students. The memorial bench we created has become a place where students leave notes and flowers. Many people who never knew Maya have been touched by her story. When I visit campus now, I almost always see someone sitting there, reading the plaque with her name. As for me, I transferred to a different university for a fresh start. I needed to be somewhere without constant reminders of what happened. I'm now studying law with a focus on victims' rights and technology-facilitated abuse. I want to help prevent what happened to Maya from happening to others. I continue to attend therapy, though less frequently now. I've found purpose in channeling my grief into prevention and advocacy. My PTSD symptoms have improved significantly, though I still have occasional nightmares and anxiety attacks. Layla, Jade, and Nina remain part of my support system. We formed a small campus organization that provides peer support for victims of image-based abuse. Nina is now in law school and occasionally works with me on awareness campaigns. I've started dating someone new who understands my history and supports my advocacy work. It's been challenging to trust again, but taking it slow has helped. On the anniversary of Maya's death last week, Maya's parents, Nina, Layla, Jade, and I gathered at the original memorial bench. We shared stories about Maya and planted flowering perennials that will bloom each spring. It felt like the right way to honor her memory, creating something beautiful and lasting. I'll never forget Maya or stop missing her, but I've finally begun to move from merely surviving to actually living again. I know she would want that for me.